Tere hommikust kõigile, rõõm teid siin näha. Austatud Riigikogu esimees, Riigikogu liikmed, Arenguseire nõukoja liikmed, esinejad, külalised. Mina olen Tea Danilov, Arenguseire Keskuse juhataja ja kasutan võimalust enne põhiprogrammi algust rääkida paar sõna sellest, mis meid siin täna ees ootab ja miks me siia kogunesime. In case you don't understand me, you don't have a clue what I'm talking about, so please have a headset and we have arranged the translation. Ja vastupidi ka, kui hiljem esinevad väliseksperdid, siis kellel vaja, palun kasutage tõlget, nad räägivad inglise keeles. Kui alustada algusest, siis natuke rohkem kui kuu aega tagasi kiitis Arenguseire nõukoda heaks Arenguseire tegevuskava, mis näeb ette, et Arenguseire Keskus viib läbi järgmise 1,5 aasta jooksul 3 suuremahulist uuringut. Neist üks, esimene avaliku valitsemise tuleviku uuring rõhuasetusega e-riigil ja e-valitsusel, teine analüüsib tööturgu, tuleviku tööd ja 3. tootlikkuse pikaajalisi arenguid. Kui ma ütlen uuring, siis teen ma seda parema sõna puudumisel. Tegemist on mõnevõrra laiemate protsessidega, mille raames me valdkonna teadlaste, ametnike ja poliitikute ekspertiisi ja elukogemuse koosmõjus soovime tõstatada teemasid, küsimusi, mis täna veel ei pruugi olla pakilised ja tungivad, aga muutuvad selleks lähiajal. Ja samamoodi nende uuringute tulemina neile peale ehitada stsenaariumid, võimalikud alternatiivid, mis võivad selles uuritavas teemas hakata juhtuma, nii radikaalsemad kui vähem radikaalsed. Ja need omakorda võiksid olla head selleks, et erinevaid poliitikavalikuid konteksti panna ja paremini mõista võimalike otsuste tagajärgi. Täna me sellele tegevusele, sellele ühisloomingule anname avapaugu ja tänastes töötubades, nende töötubade korraldamiseks on 2 põhjust. Esimene on see, et paremini kasutada kollektiivset aju, mis töötab teadupärast alati tulemuslikumalt kui üksikud inimesed. Ja teiseks ja veel olulisemana see, et need uuringud hiljem võimalikult hästi vastaksid teie ootustele. Et see on see võimalus täna siin tõstatada sõlmküsimusi, võtmetegureid, olulisi tahke, mida nendes uuringutes arvesse võtta. Selleks, et see töö meil paremini läheks, inspireerivad meid hommiku esimeses osas 2 ettekandjat. Ulf Mannervik firmast Norman Partners on pikaajalise strateegiate analüüsi kogemusega ja õpetab vastavat ainet Oxfordi Ülikoolis ja on kirjutanud sel teemal ka paar raamatut. Ja Ricardo Borges de Castro Euroopa Komisjonist esindab Euroopa Poliitika ja Strateegia Keskust ja selle keskuse rolliks on viia läbi arenguseiret ja analüüsida erinevaid stsenaariume. Ning vähetähtis ei ole see, et vastav keskus asub komisjoni president Junckeri vastutusalas, vahetu otsejuhtimise all. Ja üks tehniline remark veel siia juurde. Me hea meelega palume teil enne lahkumist täita väiksed tagasidelehed, need on tõesti mikroskoopilised, üksnes üks küsimus ja väike kommentaari lahter ja see on jällegi selleks hea, et me järgmistel kordadel ja kogu selles uuringu protsessi käigus saaksime paremini vastata teie ootustele. Ja teil on võimalus välja minnes, on tagasiside-lehed korvi sees, täidate ära ja pistate sinna samasse tagasi ja ka töötubade raames jaotatakse neid laiali, nii et selle eest juba palju tänu teile ette. Nüüd on mul hea võimalus tutvustada meie tänase hommikujuhti, siis mitte õhtujuhti, aga hommikujuhti, kelleks on Margo Loor ettevõttest Speak Smart, mis mulle teadaolevalt on välja kasvanud väitlusklubist. Ning Margo ja tema head kolleegid Speak Smartist aitavad meil läbi viia töötubasid ja teha ka hiljem kibekiireid ja põhjapanevaid kokkuvõtteid. Ja enne, kui ma mikrofoni Margole üle annan, on mul endal võimalus ja suur au anda avasõnadeks sõna Riigikogu esimehele Eiki Nestorile. Palun.
Tere jõudu! See amet, mida ma nüüd 4. aastat pead, on mind õpetanud, et ükski üritus ei hakka ennem peale, kui keegi peaks ta avama. Sellepärast ma siin ka teie ees olen. Arenguseire Keskus on siis nüüd tänaseks meil leidnud kodu Riigikogus, ütleme siis nii. Ja eks ta ühtpidi on, nende tänane tegevus on selle varasema jätk mingit pidi, aga teisest küljest ka meie jaoks, Riigikogu jaoks kindlasti uus kogemus ja põnev kogemus. Nii et hoiame talle kõik pöialt, kas või sellel lihtsal põhjusel on hea, et Riigikogu majas on, kuidas ma siis ütleks, diplomaatiliselt oma kolleegide kohta, et kuna siin on startup Speak Smart, siis meie startup on enam-vähem rohkem vote correctly. Ja selles mõttes oleks suur soov, et näiteks see tarkus, mis praegu siia saali on kogunenud, mõjutaks oma tööga ka ühte teist saali, mis siin lähedal on. Oluline on ta seetõttu, et ilmselt me oleme tänapäeva maailmas aru saanud, et mitmed keerulised teemad on olnud ja toonud kaasa probleeme, mida me ei ole osanud ette näha. Et siit ka väga palju võib-olla selliseid küsimärke, kas või kaasaegses poliitikas. Ma nüüd kordan ühte väljendit, mis mulle hästi meeldib ja mida üks Eesti Vabariigi minister korduvalt kasutab, nimelt nende keeruliste probleemide kätte jäänud inimesed ootavad vastuseid. Ja on palju poliitikuid, kes on valmis neid kohe pakkuma. Hästi lihtsaid, arusaadavaid ja kogu probleem on ju selles, et inimestele nad meeldivad, nad on lihtsad arusaadavad, aga nad ei hakka mitte kunagi tööle. Sellegi poolest on inimesed valmis kas või nende ideede eest hääletama. Ja kuidagi kurb on vaadata suure riigi juhti, kes patsutab inimestele õlale ja paneb nad uskuma, et ära muretse mees, me toome su töökohad tagasi. Kuidas ta seda teeb, kui selle töökoha on võtnud robot või internet? Aga ka nende, et oleks vähem valetamist ja võib-olla täielikult välistada seda ei suudagi, aga keeruliste küsimuste lahendused paraku keerulised on. Nii et soovin teile jõudu ja siis lähen oma startupi vaatama, kuidas meil vote correctly töötab. Edu!
Tere ka minu poolt. Oma kolleege, kellega te kohtute päeva teises pooles, ma tutvustan teile veidi hiljem. Praegu on aeg minna meie päevaga edasi meie esimese esineja juurde. Meie esimene esineja, nii nagu Tea juba alguses lühidalt ka tutvustas, on tausta poolest siis nii konsultatsiooni tausta kui akadeemilise tausta toob kokku enda kogemuses. Ja tegemist on siis rahvusvahelise konsultatsiooni, strateegia, planeerimise ja innovatsiooni eksperdiga, kes on ettevõtte Norman Partners asutav partner ja ühtlasi siis Oxfordi Ülikoolis Saidi ärikolledži õppejõud. Nii et mul on, ja tema mõttetöö on juba Arenguseire Keskuses tehtavat täitsa oluliselt mõjutanud. Mul on väga hea meel anda sõna härra Ulf Mannervikile.
Thank you. So unfortunately I'm not a professor yet, but I'm a director at Said Business School. I'm delighted to be here today. Can I use the, let's see how this works here. Okay, I'll stay in from here. First of all, please excuse my ignorance of not speaking your languages here today, but having to stick to English. And thanks for coping with that. I am going to talk about scenario planning using the Oxford approach. There are many variants of scenario planning. And what I will be talking about today is the Oxford approach. Here you see 2 books about the Oxford approach applied. It's also, for those of you who are familiar with scenario planning, the same as the Shell approach to scenario planning. Many of the people in Oxford come from Shell or work with Shell, and Norman Partners also are advisors to Shell in the scenario planning. So that's just setting the scene. I'll talk about 3 topics here today. First of all, I'll talk about when is it good to use scenario planning? At what times and for what types of topics? Secondly, what is scenario planning? And how is it used? It's used in different ways, and it's good for you, I think, at this stage to get a sense of what it can be used for. Because as with any approaches, there are also limitations and demarcations. You have to understand the demarcations as well. But I thought I'd start with a story. And this story is about Turkey. And it's about the upbringing of the Turkey. Turkey was brought up in a farm. And steadily over time, as you can see, the well-being of the turkey improves. And you can see that at times there's a bit of a blip in the curve. It becomes a bit ill. The nice farmer steps into the barn and provides medicine to the turkey. The turkey learns to read its environment. It gets good at understanding the immediate environment, the other animals. He learns about the dog. He learns to be careful about the dog. He learns how to handle the dog. And if you would be asking this turkey about what would you expect for tomorrow, I think it's quite plausible that he would expect tomorrow to go on as yesterday did. And you can see that the well-being of the farmer is about to improve. In a big study on strategies and policies that failed, these were the 4 top reasons of failing policies of strategies in large organizations. And you can see that the top reason was misleading prejudgments. What does that mean? It means that they had the wrong assumptions about the place they were in, the world they were in, the context they were in. Say, what's a mountain goat doing up here in a cloud bag? It says under there. All strategies and policies are based on assumptions about what will work look like, or what will transportation look like. What will economy look like? What will the economic field and geopolitical fields look like? We always make assumptions. And in the most cases where strategies and policies have failed, there has been change in the world, and we have not recognized the change. This is a caricature of a conventional forecast, because I'll be talking about forecasting and contrasting that with scenario planning. So you have a point in time, which is where the black line ends. That's where you do the forecast. And then you have a single point projection, which is the middle one, assuming a specific position. And then you have a more optimistic alternative and a more pessimistic alternative, because you've done sensitivity analysis. The problem with this is that you cast the logic of yesterday forward. So you're not assuming any breaks in logic. You're basically taking yesterday and assuming that Tomorrow will be like that, but a bit more. Recent times have shown to us how problematic forecasting is. It has shown demarcations, limitations of forecasting. Now, this is not a big speech against forecasting, but I want to point at some of its limitations. Forecasting is suitable in stable environments. It's not suitable in unstable environments. This is the 2009 GDP growth compared with the forecast in May 2008. That's the orange ones on the top, and the red ones on the bottom is the actual in 2009. And I could have shown you a number of pictures like this, also from more recent years, where there has been structural change that our forecasting has been not able to cope with. The problem with forecasting is that, and I apologize because there's probably some fantastically good forecasters among you, but the problem with forecasting is that it tends to fail you when you need it the most. I should say right away that with all the large global firms, organizations, and governments that we work with all do forecasting, but they do scenario planning as well. Forecasting is not very suitable in unstable environments. We call these, in Oxford, we call these environments tuna environments. They're turbulent in the way that the bigger world imposes itself on you and changes the game. Your playing field is being changed by what's happening on the outside. And it gets intertwined with your domestic situation. That's turbulence. It's uncertain because there are big decisions that have not yet been taken. And it's not necessarily by one individual. It can be by many individuals. Trump, anyone? It's novel. Simply, we haven't been in that situation yet. We don't know what it is like because it's novel. It's very difficult to forecast something that is a very new situation. You don't have a reliable database or data points to go back to and to extrapolate from. Or it's ambiguous. We simply don't know what's happening quite yet. And it might be different things happening depending on what you're looking at, with what interest you have looking at the situation. So these situations and these environments that we call the tuna environments, there is more helpful to do scenario planning than forecasting, at least than only forecasting. So there are different ways of dealing with the future when you're into long-term planning for policy or strategy purposes. You can be doing prediction about the future. And it's not only astronomists, it's a lot of prediction going on in various corridors. Or you can be doing forecasting where you're extrapolating or modeling based on historical data, a bit like the Turkey. Or you can be doing scenarios, which is not thinking about just one future, but simulating the different plausible futures that you may end up in. The different environments, the different contexts that you might find yourselves in and that your policies might find themselves in. That's scenario planning. With scenario planning, we make a distinction between three levels of analysis. And sorry for being a bit theoretical at a point here. I'll try to be as little of that as possible. One is the larger context, which is these big macro factors that are, the values in society. Will they accept being taxed or not? Or will they accept the rule of law or not? And the various values of the citizens in various parts of the world, the economic development, technology, climate change and its development. These are the kind of big macro factors that are out there in the bigger world. And this we can survey and appreciate, but we cannot influence it. It will happen to us. Then there's another environment that can be called the stakeholder environment or transactional environment. You have your transactions there. You interact with actors. This is where you have actors. This is where you have policies. You engage with, you change, you inform, you collaborate. And this is where you can influence and co-design. I looked at your previous, or had your previous scenario set described earlier on here, and without deliberately offending anyone who might be have liked that very much, seemed like it was designed in that stakeholder environment, more about the stakeholder environment. And then you have you as the actor and your choices that you will be doing to engage with the environment. Now, some talk about scenarios as the different choices that you can be making. That's not scenarios in the Oxford sense and Shell and Norman Partners sense. In the Oxford sense and Norman Partners sense, we talk about scenarios as how this bigger world can develop and how that will impact your playing field. So what will work look like? And what will that imply for your policies for work? And what should you be doing? Here's an example. These are shipping scenarios that we developed with Wärtsilä. So we helped Wärtsilä build up their scenario practice. I think we worked with Wärtsilä for close to 10 years. And I use them as example here, not only because you provide a lot of energy to the shipping industry. Of course, you know that Wärtsilä is the dominant player in the shipping industry. Before I go into this, I should say that when they do scenarios, they don't do, and this is for the marine part of Wärtsilä, it's not the power part. When they do scenarios, they don't do, and what Wärtsilä provides is big engines and propulsion systems, right, that drive the ship. And for a new build, that's 40% of the cost. It's a big chunk of the cost. But if you look at the operation, it's a bigger chunk as well, right? When you operate the ship and you take it places and you burn the fuel and what you have you. So when they do scenarios, they don't do scenarios about ship engines. They don't, which would be very close to you, the small circle in the middle that I just showed. They don't do it about ships, which would be the transactional environment. They do it about shipping, the bigger world of shipping, because that will impact other players around them. That will help them inform about how the bigger game might be changing, gives them early signs to listen for, to understand how that game is changing. And it helps them also engage with their clients and suppliers to discuss what can we be doing to meet these changes that will happen to the whole industry. So it gives a bigger perspective and a longer time horizon and space for you to react to changes as well. So when they design the scenarios, what we'll be looking at now is not the scenarios. They went through a process of identifying the big uncertain factors that will have a big impact on shipping. And you will be doing similar work, I understand, this afternoon here, starting to look at what are factors that might be informing the work and the e-governance and so forth. And through their process, they found these big uncertain factors. They also look at trends. Trends are very important to look at because trends you can plan on. The problem is with the long term that a lot of the trends bend. With the scenario planning, you explore how the trends bend. And here are 5 important big factor areas that they, through their research, found would be decisive for the world of shipping by 2030. how will trade and economic growth develop? That will inform the structure and the game in the shipping. How will different actors, government, respond to climate change and sustainability issues? What about the geopolitical landscape and the global leadership? Will there be one? Will it be very fragmented? How will it play out? And what about the control of power? Who will have power in shipping? Will it be the suppliers? Will it be the customers? What types of players in the field? And in a global setting, who will have the political power that will be informing the shipping as well? And as you can see here on these trajectories, on these lines here, they explored extreme end states of these different factors. And scenarios are developed by using different combinations of end states. So if there is global action against climate change and not only local means to deal with sustainability issues, if there is global actions against climate change, how will that affect the other factors? Where will that place me on the others? And so forth. And you explore all of these at the same time. Based on that, they derived 3 different scenarios. And these were their scenarios at the time. I can share these because they just set another set. So they had these 3 scenarios, which were, we might find ourselves in a rough sea world, where there's a lot of scarcity of resources, a fight over resources, it's very unequal distribution of wealth, and so forth. A struggling world, combating unsuccessfully climate change, and very much every man and woman for themselves. Or a yellow river, where the political and the economical power has shifted away from Ricardo and his friends and us, and towards a more Asian setting. Or will we have open oceans, which is what is more global governance and alignment around Paris agreements and a more level playing field, but also means that large organizations will be doing very well because they're good at excelling at level playing fields. These are scenarios, and they will all have their winners and losers. When we develop scenarios, we're very explicit about that there are no good or bad scenarios. The scenarios are different from each other. There will be good or bad policies in each of the scenarios. And what is a good policy in one scenario is not necessarily a good policy in another. Here's another set of scenarios. It's scenarios developed together with Chinese and UK leading politicians about the situation in large urban regions. So, surprisingly, to many of us, the situations in very large regions like the Shanghai, Yangtze River Delta, and Birmingham and London have quite some similarities in terms of challenges. They have a lot of differences as well, but there are similarities. So together with them, we developed these 4 different scenarios of what the conditions might be in these larger urban regions. Will we have high economic development or low economic development? And will there be a society where you have a lot of unrest and citizens not listening to law and not complying, very difficult to govern? Or will it be more social cohesion, so staying together? And based on this, 4 different scenarios were developed that come up in these quadrants. And these we developed only 3 months after the last 5-year plan came out in China. And they could contest their policies of the plan in these scenarios, of course, with a locked door. The only, I would say, key to making that successful for them and for understanding and embracing this way of working, of stress testing and working, was that the leading politicians really embraced it and took a lead in advocating it and stepping into, so the leading politician from the Chinese side stepped into the most difficult scenario and admitted that here are policies, we have to rethink them. I know we just launched them, but we have to rethink them because in this situation, they will not work. Let's look at what we can do to do better if these conditions were to happen. We're not hoping for them, we're hoping for another scenario, but if they were to happen, let's look at what would be a good alternative plan. So you will have a very important role to support your scenario planning capability in being a success or not, in the way that you will be giving the right questions in the beginning, so they're working on the right problems, and also really using what comes out from them. Here's another example of scenarios, more recent. You're more familiar with these types of scenarios painted out in media, as with the Brexit and what will London look like after the Brexit situation. That's another example of scenarios that we see around us. So scenarios are like lenses that we design to look at the world that we know in different ways and look at how it can be changing over a certain time period and a specific time period. What is uncertain in 10 years' time is not the same thing as what is uncertain in 30 years' time. Some fields for scenario planning, I'm just going to go through these very rapidly, but that I think are relevant in your setting. And where scenario planning is used today and is useful. Transportation is such a field. So both governments, infrastructure planners, and the transport companies and the vehicle producers are exploring what is going to happen in transportation. We have big drivers like the climate change, putting stress on infrastructure, putting stress on what fuels we can use, how many vehicles we can use, how we organize the system. E-commerce is pushing the system into more transportation, but also looking for what are the vessels that we're going to use for that. We have a sharing economy that is rewriting the landscape. So this is a Otto truck. It's a truck company that was bought by Uber, and that has driverless trucks. So they look at combining that with not having transport companies, but you as a customer, just providing in entrepreneurs through their network, but also providing self-driving vehicles for that. The whole automotive, light and heavy automotive, are going through electrification, both in roads, but also of vehicles themselves, and autonomous driving, connected vehicles, and this is virtually reshaping the landscape right now. And the jury is out on what will be the transport solutions. And you're familiar with electric roads that are being planned to make corridors in different parts of Europe and other places. So governments, too, will have bets to play into this game. And it's an area where it's good to get a sense of what is happening and what should we be doing, and what are threats and what are opportunities for us as policymakers in it. Financial revenues for governments, another big area that is exposed to a lot of drivers. We have a far more networked world, and business is far more networked today. Relocation is an issue for a lot of industries that can play for or against you. You have the blockchain technologies, which allows a very precise detailed information about what can be taxed and in real time, but it can play against you as well. You need to understand that if you're looking at the future of taxation, for instance. You have the urbanization. How are we going to fund the urbanization? Are the rural parts of the countries going to finance the urbanization? The sharing economy that comes in and puts our part of our old business models outdated. How does taxation play into that? The demographic change with older workforces. How are we going to incentivize and make it more attractive? What will be valued by the different generations, and how can we attract them? And of course, climate change. What will that imply in terms of what can we tax and what should we tax? big issues that come in for revenues there. And talking about revenues, a big area here as well is, of course, work. And this is just one aspect of it, automation. What will happen when automation has a big churn in 5 to 10 years? When this is Professor Arturo Briz from IMD, in his studies expecting that 20% of jobs in the UK will be gone by 2021. 20%. That has a quite profound impact on the economy. How are we going to handle that? And a lot of the new jobs are not there yet. They have not formed or shaped yet. So this is an area as well where you need a better idea of what might happen, and the future is not there to forecast. The energy sector, and we do a lot of our work in the energy sector with utilities, with oil and gas companies, with power companies, metering companies. Here, the field is truly changing. Dieter Helm, a professor in Oxford on energy policy and advisor, this is his latest book that just came out, advocates that it's not a matter of if we're shifting to renewables, it's a matter of when we're shifting to renewables and how we're shifting to renewables. How might that landscape look? When will that landscape come about? What can you do about it? What does it imply for you? When can you shift away? Should you shift away? Or is there still a role for shale oil, for instance? Scenarios are like extreme weathers. Extreme weathers that you test your strategies in or policies in. And you think like good engineers. You create the most fierce conditions in which your policies and strategies might find themselves in. If you're an engineer and you're designing an oil rig or a truck, you're not hoping for nice weather and just a smooth conditions. And that's how you use scenario planning as well. You use it to stress test. It doesn't mean that you're saying that you think all of the scenarios will happen, but you use them to stress test your scenario planning. It's a bit like building wind tunnels. And the scenarios are the wind tunnel, and the policies and strategy is the plane inside. You see what works, what doesn't work. Based on that, you adjust the plane. And typically, we work with checking your policies across the different scenarios. And where you see that you're in bad water, you see what would be alternatives. What are plan Bs and plan Cs that we should prepare for this? There are different uses of scenarios, and these are 4 different categories of uses. It's not outruling that there are also other uses. Sense-making, strategic decision-making, stakeholder engagement, and continuous sense-making. Sense-making is basically using scenarios to understand what might happen here, get a better sense of and reading of this game. It might be used for creating more shared norms, so getting together as a collective. Sharing our strategic thinking helps us learn about each other, how we think, and that helps us also in other settings. So that was part of the rationale for the Chinese and the UK to develop these scenarios. It was norming. It helped them to understand how the others were reasoning, and it helped them when they did other policy decisions as well. Or it can be to just identify what are our big priorities that we should put. We see that digitization might come about much harder in all of the scenarios. Or, as one big automotive manufacturer of trucks realized when doing very different scenarios, not all of them were about sustainability, and some of you had very rough conditions, but they saw that in all scenarios, resource efficiency becomes more important. Even in a struggling world, you can't just burn. You have to be very careful about how you use the resources because of economic reasons. So they took away from that and changed their strategies and saw that we have to be far more resource efficient because that will help us in all the scenarios. Strategic decision making. Here you might test specific pieces of legislation. If you do this, you also change the scenarios from being big picture stories to do forecasting also within the scenarios. Detailed quantification to test the strategy and policies under different conditions. Stakeholder engagement, as I mentioned with the Chinese and the UKs, or it's quite common in the military setting as well, to use scenarios to see what could be happening, how could we collaborate together, what are the things that really, if we put stress on ourselves together in different situations, what are the things that really become key? Oh, we realize that our communication lines fail under many conditions here. We have to work together closely more on communications, not only sharing resources in terms of military capacity, for instance. So a lot of scenarios is on stakeholder engagement. Bringing in others that you want to take an active part in developing this, the country. You're not only selling the vision of this country, you're selling the ideas of how the country could be developing in different ways in a bigger world, and what that means to you, and invite them into a dialogue about that. And then lastly, following the scenarios, continuously seeing if the scenarios are about to happen. If you prepare a plan B for a specific scenario that you may not be hoping for, but that is plausible, sense-making helps to see if you should act on that plan. Or if you see that that scenario is no longer plausible, then you can scrap the plan. So scenarios is about understanding if what you plan to do is viable in the light of what might happen. Scenario planning is up in the UK, I can tell you, and I work with parts of the government. It's not that people couldn't envision that there would be a Brexit. The problem is that there were not enough plans on what to do if there was a Brexit. So it's not enough to do scenario planning, and this is where you come into the picture. You have to do policy too, and you have to do planning too. And the value is in the planning that the scenarios inform. This is a list of things to think about. I will not dwell on it. You will get it afterwards. But I would stress one thing, and that is the being clear about the purpose is key. So you have to think about, for work or for e-governance, what are your policy issues that you really want to have to be informed by scenarios? You're not asked to say what you think the future will be, but what are the uncertainties that you are feeling and that you want to have guidance on? Clarity about the purpose in an early stage radically improves the effectiveness in a later stage. It might be, very clear to you when if you just develop the scenarios and then think about what to do with them, likelihood is quite high that the scenarios will not be adequate for that. Okay, rounding off. Scenario planning is about proactive awareness of different plausible futures. It's about accepting different views, making disagreement an asset, not a liability. Because it might be that your view of the future might fit into one of the futures that is not perhaps the main future that you're planning for, but that might come about. And then her view of the future and her alternative plan might be very valuable. And it's about enabling you to create prepared alternatives. Again, the value in scenario planning is not in the scenarios. It's in having better prepared alternatives and to make more robust policies and strategies. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ulf. Nüüd küsimusi võib küsida nii eesti kui inglise keeles, kui te küsite eesti keeles, siis need tõlgitakse esinejale. But let me start by asking the first question. In a way, I'm trying to find out what the Turkey would have done differently had it heard your presentation. Or put in another way, I'm looking for perhaps some additional motivation for our afternoon. I'm trying to find out what hope does the human brain have in the world that we're in and entering further and further, which is interconnected and therefore extremely complex. In the afternoon, we're going to have to select the factors and describe the different endpoints of the possible events. On the Wärtsilä slide, you had one extreme end which said China is going to dominate the global trade. What if China went into civil war, broke up, and it would be India or Brazil that ended up leading the global trade? Or I was working with people in the Estonian electricity grid yesterday, and they brought the example of a few years ago from the Ukrainian electricity grid, where hackers took down not only the electricity grid, but also the contingency systems, the backup systems, the call centers that people use to notify. They did have backup plans, then they did have contingency systems, but so many factors changed at the same time that no one had thought of was possible. So you had a slide there a few slides ago that said it's about what may happen. I guess I'm trying to understand how far that may should stretch.
Okay, so I guess I can do it like that. So be clear that scenario planning is not prediction, it's not crystal balls, right? So it's making a better assumption, informed assumption about what the future for your specific area might look like in a certain time horizon. And then you use that up to looking at what does that mean short-term, mid-term, and long-term, and so forth. It will not, so if you're asking it to sort of capture everything that could happen, of course, theoretically, you could have thousands of scenarios. Now, the trick to be able to plan is to condense it into a set of stories that are small enough to be able to live with and to comprehend. So you look at under which conditions, to bring in aspects like that, under which conditions would you have a more difficult situation in terms of IT security? And what are the kind of developments that could happen? And you will play out that in particular in one scenario. So it's a home for some of the contingency planning that you're talking about, but it's not contingency planning. This is the bigger shape of the world that it might look like in a couple of years. So let me give you one example. We worked with a big energy company and government representatives in a big Middle East country. 5 years prior to the Arabic Spring, we developed one of the scenarios which was very similar to the Arabic Spring. It was a big surprise scenario. I remember when it came up. And it was very alien, and they sort of wanted to toss it out initially. But they didn't toss it out. They made plans for it, and they did fairly well when the Arabic Spring came. It wasn't that they had envisioned exactly something that was looking like the Arabic Spring, and it didn't start exactly like that either. But in the character, it was the big shape of it.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was thinking with my question too. Teisi küsimusi kelleltki?
What's the reason why often people dealing with strategy planning are coming from the big companies, back offices, or partnerships, and their analysts who have, at least for a certain period of their life, worked for big shots? What's the reason? Especially energy companies.
I'm sorry, could you...
Why people dealing with the strategy planning very often are coming from ranks of or partnerships with the big energy companies, for example, big companies, international, multinational companies. You've mentioned yourself that actually the Shell was the case in here particularly. Why?
Do you mean why the big companies use scenario planning? Yeah, I think that scenario planning has been I've worked with scenario planning in a big Nordic retailer, but that's rare. Retail is detail. They like to think 3 months ahead, that's far ahead. And to many of the politicians that I worked with, Beyond 3 years, that's difficult. And even within those 3 years, they like to swing around the guns, you know. They will steer. I'm sure you will not, but others elsewhere have a tendency of doing that. I think that some of these larger organizations that have big investments in infrastructure, if you're sitting on with a portfolio with a big piece of nuclear in it, you're putting something into the ground and in place that will operate and be there for 50 years. So it is very long-term. So the ones that have big long-term investments tend to work with it. And that tends to, I mean, Shell, long-term is 40 years. They also have a slightly shorter long-term, which is 20 years for another part of the business. But their investment horizon, and this is important, the investment horizon is the key. So their investment horizon is long. And therefore, they tend to see shortcomings in forecasting.
Thank you for the talk. My question is about the scenario's accuracy in long term. You have a long experience in this field. What is your estimate, like, I know it's difficult to make, what's the percentage of scenarios that are accurate, and what is the scenarios that are not accurate?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So a bit we would say, like, think about scenarios like insurances, right? So often when you stress test, you know, you might have an insurance against something happening. So you're seeing that the world might develop in a certain way, and you get your plan B to cope with it if that were to happen. Now, that may not happen, but if it would be you know, a development, you would have been prepared. And it's a bit like that with scenario planning as well. In hindsight, if we look at scenarios developed, and did they come about? We often get the question about that. Well, often some of them come about in different parts of the world. And in some cases, one of the big ones really were the ones that changed. Now, an important aspect of that is that others are also using scenarios and making their decisions based on that. So that will be informing your long-term future as well. So that in itself will be shaping the scenarios, which is a reason for, also because you're policymakers, the decisions that you make will impact the future work in Estonia. So you will want to update your scenarios to keep them alive. And if you update them, they are more accurate over time, up to a point in time where they simply don't, there's something big that has happened and it's simply not part of it anymore.
Ja meil on üheks küsimuseks veel aega, kui kellelgi on.
So thank you very much for this interesting presentation. You mentioned that designing scenarios is like for planning extreme weather events. My question is that although you brought a very good example of how it became useful when planning for one extreme weather event during Arabic Spring, so to say, don't you find that there could be a bias towards designing these very extreme opposite scenarios, while it could be more useful to look at, well, maybe if it rains today or there's a sunshine, it's not extreme, but the actions might differ very much.
Yeah, the problem is that you're not in problem if it's sunshine tomorrow. So you don't need an insurance against that. But I would say that often you will find that one of the scenarios will be close to your planning scenario, right? And then you might have 2 or 3 scenarios that are more extreme and that are plausible. They could happen, just like Brexit happened, but most people thought that Brexit would not happen. And that you prepare alternatives for. Or at least you get a better risk understanding of your policies and strategies. And I'm sure that everyone in here is very good at that at an individual level. So you risk assess your policies and strategies at an individual level. Because we do that as human beings. We think about, if I do this, what might happen? If that happens, what does that imply for me? With scenarios, you do it in a collective way. And you use the power of the collective thinking to develop these consistent stories in which you can test your policies.
Okay, thank you so much, Ulf. Meie päeva keskel on kohvipaus, mille jooksul on ka võimalik siis esinejate juurde veel minna ja küsida nende käest küsimusi või arendada vestlust. Aga läheme edasi meie tänase teise esineja juurde. Ühelt poolt oleks loomulikult Eestis kummaline rääkida strateegilisest planeerimisest ilma selleta, et rääkida Euroopa Liidust ja Euroopa Liidus tehtavast planeerimisest. Aga teiselt poolt Ulf oma ettekandes juba tõi mõningaid näiteid sellest, kuidas stsenaariumite planeerimist on kasutatud. Meie teine esineja räägib veel lähemalt siis sellest, kuidas Euroopa Komisjon on kasutanud stsenaariumeid strateegilises planeerimises. Nii et mul on väga hea meel anda teiseks ettekandeks sõna Euroopa Komisjoni Arenguseire nõunikule Ricardo Borges.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. Is this one working? Yeah, very good. Great. Thank you. Well, first of all, let me just start by saying a big word of thank you for having me here today. It's for me a pleasure to be here. I always find these occasions as good learning opportunities, and I've already so far listening to Ulf, I've learned quite a bit. And I hope that then also from the exchanges that we might have, I can learn a little bit more. I need to move this from here. First, I would like to say, as I was introduced as, and correctly so, as a member of the European Political Strategy Center, which is the European Commission in-house think tank, which responds directly to President Juncker. I just want to say that what I'll say here today are my personal views, and that they don't necessarily reflect those of the President or of the European Commission, so that I can also speak a little bit more freely without getting myself in trouble. And also, I just finally to say that that it's a pleasure to be here at a time when Estonia is going to take the presidency of the Council of the EU. These will be very important 6 months for the EU. And I'm absolutely sure we have met already with the Estonian presidency team and the people that are working on this several times. A colleague of mine was here yesterday in preparation of the digital conference. So there's been a lot of exchange between the EPSC and Estonia and the team. And so we are very looking forward to these 6 months. And before I go into sort of the topic of creating impact through strategic foresight, because I think a lot of you would do this as sort of as your way of work, but in particularly you do it in a context which is a political institution. And this is a relatively new outfit, the Center for Strategic Foresight here at the Parliament. And so it's a little bit in that context that probably I'll be more on the how we do things at the EU level, so that you can understand. But my point was that because there might be, it's always good that there are skepticals anywhere. And if there are skeptics here, I would just want to say that to a certain extent, we all do strategic foresight, or we all do foresight, because it's, recent studies tells us that human beings spend more time thinking about the future than about the past. So we do this in our daily lives. So just for, just a warning to the skeptics that, you actually are doing this. Probably you don't notice it, but you are. So moving forward, I just want to, also from my relative, the experience and from my learning experience so far on strategic foresight, I want to first cover a little bit what we do at the EPSC. So basically who we are, what we do, and how we do it. Also at the European Commission as linked to our work to the EPSC. Also at the European Strategy and Policy Analysis System, which I will explain in a minute what it is. And also a couple of reflections on strategic foresight and how I see things moving forward. And, looking at the EPSC, I like, we of course, we are the internal think tank, but I like to think of us more as a startup of the Commission. We started, a couple of years ago from scratch, and, we've been moving on to do work that I will in a minute explain. But I think, what is, if I would highlight a few things about what we do and how we do, I think the first thing is the team. And the team is a crucial part of our work at the EPSC, because in a sense, it's interdisciplinary, it's intergenerational, it's very diverse. We have people from all backgrounds. And what the T-shaped people basically tells you, that it's the shape, the T is like this, right? Where you have a specialization, you know a little bit more about a subject, but you're also able to reach to other disciplines. You are able to do other things. You can also be operational. You can get your hands on and get things done. And so it's a little bit that spirit that most of us, from the age of 24 to the age of 60, all of us, in a sense, we have these characteristics. Then, we also have a new way of working and communicating within the Commission context. And the way of working, I think our mandate is to push the limits, think a little bit out of the box, help us a little bit, like Ulf was saying, breaking the assumptions, making people think about the problems and, in a sense, thinking about the future, or in terms of, given that the goal is to be better prepared to face different and alternative futures, it's, in a sense, is to make people be able and be comfortable to challenge their own assumption. And so this thinking out of the box, pushing the limits, and sometimes saying things that other DGs in the Commission would not dare to say, that is our role, that's what we have, that's why the EPSC was created. And then, in terms of communication, just to give, and these are two sort of very concrete examples. At the EPSC, we have our own comms team. And I don't know, I know that the center here is still being formed. You are a small team. Again, now you have all this group of people that can collaborate with you. But for us, what we have found is that having a communications team within the team, so we have a webmaster, we have a graphic designer, we have a data analyst, we can do the products in-house. We can do the products within the center, so we can not only establish trademark, but we can also, assure quality. And so this is very important. We have found that this, in terms of communicating, is very relevant because, in my view, strategic foresight or this type of exercises, they are to be communicated. They are a form of communication. And the only way to have impact is precisely the ability that we have to communicate, the analysis that we do, and also then to translate them, obviously, like Ulf was saying, into policy. And then, of course, we have the mandate to engage in foresight and anticipatory governance. That's part of our sort of daily work. And this we do sort of in many different forms and shapes. These are some of the activities that we do. We do research, we do policy or evidence-based policy advice, strategic thinking. We do, again, foresight. Then let me focus on the events and on liaison with think tanks and other outfits. And again, this is also, I think, one of the advantages that we have. We have an events team. So we have a group of people that are devoted to organize our own events, from big conferences to a brainstorm. So these are sort of the things that we have within the center, which is made up of 40 people in total, that is able to sort of to get these things done. So I would, I apologize to be probably focusing on what is more concrete, but we believe that these are sort of the issues that sort of have been allowed us to have some impact within the system of the European Commission. And moving on, so if I would go into what I would say, what are our foresight roles and sort of what could be an emerging method of foresight for the EPSC. On the foresight roles, our approach is that, now from 6 months now, I've been sort of the advisor on strategic foresight at the EPSC. But we believe that any member of the EPSC, any analyst on the EPSC is doing and should be doing strategic foresight. The same way that we believe that in any DG of the European Commission, and of course this is a gradual process, there should be this sort of whole of policy cycle approach in terms of strategic foresight, having this idea of anticipation, questioning our assumptions, what might be the alternative futures, what could be the implications into our policy. So we don't think that should be a single person or one person in each area. It should be sort of a way of approaching the issues. So I think, and the whole of policy cycle, of course, this is ambitious, is to go from policy creation and design to policy implementation and evaluation, right? To try to have benchmark these issues and try to see whether we have been able to achieve in ingraining or instilling this foresight sort of mentality or foresight approach into our policies. Then is to advocate, and again, it's a little bit the same thing. We advocate throughout the House that preparedness, strategic foresight is a relevant element to have in any DG, given that a lot of the policy that is done, from DG Mare to DG Trade or DG Taxud, it's about the future. It's about policy. It's about designing policy and to be able to be resilient in whatever alternative futures we might face, like Ulf again was saying. I'll keep on referring to Ulf because there are so many, points that are relevant for, for this, and so it's indeed part of our roles. Then raise awareness, and again, Ulf had this little slide on blockchain. And I don't doubt that probably within the Commission, in some DG, there will be an expert thinking about blockchain. But it was the EPSC, the first entity within the Commission that brought blockchain into the political discourse, into the political sort of arena at the highest level. About 2 years ago in our conference when we brought Don Tapscott, which is one of the sort of the key experts on blockchain technology. But what I'm trying to say is to raise awareness on issues that might be coming at us and that we need to be prepared. And that in some way, because political leaders are so focused on sort of the immediate and the short term, and we had already a little bit of a discussion here about this, and I would like to take that forward. We do need sometimes to have that role of raising awareness. Then, crucially, building networks. We learn more from other people than sometimes from ourselves. So, and of course now I'm presenting, but there's this idea that when we are listening, we are learning. It's actually very true, and that's why for us, this building networks, going out, leaving Brussels, coming to the member states, going to other places, listen to people and what they're doing, because in a sense that then, these networks that we have been building, and there are several, then they feed into the ways and into the methods that we utilize for foresight. And then finally creating safe spaces. When I got here, I look at this room, and this room is perfect because this room is multifunctional. And I'm sorry to talk about rooms and spaces, but rooms and spaces are fundamental for ideas. And at the EPSC, we have a room. Basically, it's a little bit smaller like this, but it's completely empty. You can do whatever you want in there. You can put chairs around, you can put tables, you can put people turn, you can do whatever. It's a multifunction room. And this is fundamental to be able to bring people and to have them relax and be able to discuss issues that sometimes are very sensitive within the European Commission, within our political context. But they know, and this is, this safe space is relevant because we also do it normally at lunchtime, so people can come, people can engage, then they can go back to their work, and these normally we bring, sort of, let's say, the heads of cabinet of the commissioners, of the vice presidents, and so having a space where people can debate ideas on policy or, tricky issues, that can be done. And we also sometimes do the dinners, and the dinners are also helpful because these are sort of even for more senior people. They've had a very long day of work. Try not to do this very late. Serve them some nice wine. Have them relaxed. And then, I'm being very serious about this, then ideas do really flow and people feel more relaxed to talk about this. What is crucial is that people know that whatever is discussed there stays there, right? Okay, it might have implications, might have follow-up in terms of policy, in terms of things that are done, but you create a space where people can actually engage. And that for us is very, very, very relevant. Then in terms of all the foresight methods, I would say that we start by the brainstorming and what Ulf was saying, asking the right questions. First, what is the problem? What we need to address? And then what's the right question that we need to ask to address that problem? So it's a little bit like this, and this normally either can be with a team, can be with foreign experts, or people from outside. Then sometimes we do, there's a lot of literature on trends, and so we can look at the trends, we can look at what's going on. Horizon scanning, we also use a lot of, instead of reading studies and studies, try to find, what are weak signals, what are the emerging, things that we should be paying attention. A lot of times, it's through our events, bringing people from outside that tells us, that can inform us on issues that we should be paying attention. Then sometimes we do these, scenarios or visionaries. Visionaries is actually a word that I heard from Angela Wilkinson, which is also a colleague from Wolf, which is a little bit sort of a combination. It's a vision, but scenario. It has a little bit of both. And I think sometimes we do more visionaries than scenarios, because this is another issue that I'll come to towards the end on the scenarios. Because as you've seen, some of the issues, some of the scenarios that Ulf showed us, these are extremely, I would imagine, time-consuming and resource-consuming. And so sometimes, the time, again, going back to the time frames, the times that we have to respond to certain things are much shorter. And so there are sometimes sort of intellectual process that we can follow that can take us to sort of these visionaries that can be helpful. And then, of course, backcasting for us as a policy institution, it's very relevant that we actually try to then plot, backwards what we need to do in preparation of something. That or some goal that we want to achieve in the future. So I would say that this sort of enters into our sort of work on strategic foresight. And again, like in the previous presentation, strategic foresight is really not about prediction, but it's more about preparedness and to be aware of what might happen. And this has led us then, finally to have some of the work that we do. Is not public. It's directly between the EPSC and the president and the president's cabinet or the vice presidents. But a lot of them, a lot of the work is published. And so here we have our Foresight newsletter, the trends, the Trump presidency scenarios, the future of work, which I'll brought copies of most of these, which I leave to the center, so that you can have a look at it. And again, all of these is produced by us within the center, and all the graphs, everything that it's in there is produced by us. And now moving on a little bit to how the EPSC methods and the EPSC sort of way of working within the Commission then end up sort of informing a little bit a larger process, which is the white paper on the future of Europe. And like Wolf was saying, strategic foresight or scenario planning can be a great form of engagement. And we found, or it was thought that at this occasion, that the white paper on the future of Europe has become an extremely important tool of not only of political engagement, but also of engagement of civil society and citizens in terms of discussing the future that is basically about our future in the European Union. And I think at least, I've been in the Commission only for 5.5 years, but what I know is that I'd never seen a paper like this published by the Commission. First, that is very accessible. You can read it in half an hour. It's very easy to read. It has scenarios. Normally, the Commission tells this is the way to go, and this is what you're going to do. No, this time, it was thought that no, we're going to present. This will be a paper on scenarios. So this was very different. And of course, the paper is motivated by, of course, key drivers for Europe's future. that were identified, and that are, and I'm sure that most of you have seen the papers. But I think it was first a sort of an honest assessment of where we are, and given, basically, if we look at the list of unthinkables, to use another word that now it's become sort of also very current, and I would draw your attention to Thinking the Unthinkable by Nick Gowing and Peter Langdon, also from Oxford, on this report that they've produced after interviewing dozens of CEOs and public officials about how they were coping with uncertainty, and not very well. So this report is quite interesting. But I mean, this white paper comes sort of in the trail of first the 2008 economic crisis, the annexation of Ukraine, the migration crisis, Brexit, you name it. So this sort of comes, brings Europe to the situation when this paper was produced. And of course, there are other issues that that there are there. But what is clear is that relatively, future we're going to be poor. Relatively, it's just it's just the way it is. We spend less on defense. There's others are spending more on defense than we are, and also we also don't spend it. And this is also part of one of our reflection papers that was published last week. Even the way that we spend is also not the best way we spend on defense. It creates duplications, inefficiencies. So that there's a lot to think about. But this is and also we're going to be older, and we're going to be much less. So this is basically, you know, this is the reality that we need to face, right? And this is what sort of brought a little bit, you know, to the fore on this paper. And most of the papers, you know, the reflection papers that have followed the white paper tend to have this, you know, first, you know, a look into the drivers, trends, also, you know, what is the context in which these things are happening, and, you know, how they might look in the future. And then, you know, I didn't put any geopolitical, you know, trends here, but because I wanted to invite you to do that exercise. And you just you can go to Google, and you just sort of Google for a map of political fragility or state fragility. And you just look at the map, see where Europe is, and see what's around. State fragility. And then you also Google another map, which is population growth to 2050. And if you just oppose both maps, you will see that the places where there's more fragility due to conflict, climate change stress, you know, resource stress, whatever, is precisely the same areas where you will have more population growth in the world in the next few, you know, decades. So just think about it, and think that Europe is in the middle of that. So, you know, it's just sometimes we don't do this exercise, we don't visualize this. It's important to visualize. And then, of course, this led us to the five scenarios. And, you know, again, this was quite surprising for the Commission, because again, people are always expecting the Commission to present, you know, this is the way to go. No, these are not blueprints. You know, they are not policy prescriptions. You know, but they are plausible. They are sort of plausible ways in which the EU might evolve depending on the decisions that member states will make today. So, of course, and even the time frame is only to 2025, so it's 8 years from now. But the point of these scenarios was precisely President Juncker wanted to invite member states, civil society, parliaments, politicians to engage in this debate about the future of Europe. And so, of course, there are, you know, different ways to do this. You know, these scenarios, you know, they're neither exhaustive or mutually exclusive. You know, probably the future will look like a combination of some of these scenarios. And but again, it was a form, it was a way that we found, again, scenarios and strategic foresight as a way to engage people politically and publicly. Then this has been followed, as you know, by several reflection papers. We have now presented, you know, the one on the social dimension of Europe, harnessing globalization, the deepening of the economic and monetary union, and future of European defense. As you can see then from the papers themselves, some of them, you know, extrapolate some on these scenarios, some others just, you know, on harnessing globalization. We have a central scenario, which is globalization. We just need to, you know, make it better. We just need to utilize it better. We just need to make sure that those that have not yet benefited from globalization should, you know, get their share. So that's sort of more our approach to that. But so you will see that this exercise has been different. And again, but the papers are very much sort of then built on the same sort of structure, trends, drivers, where we are, where we want to go. Some of them, like, for example, the deepening the economic and the monetary union, it's more sort of a roadmap of where we want to go. So here the Commission states this is the way to go, right? So there's, I think there's less there. You know, of course, you know, you can still discuss ways on moving forward, but again, there is a clear position. And I'll go back again to communication and how you, I'm sorry, these are probably, you don't see them very well, but anyway, but these are sort of ways that you can communicate on trends and you can communicate on scenarios. And to, you know, on the right, you see the circles are the three different possibilities of, you know, of the, let's say, moving on defense. So you can start, so let's say the most ambitious will be common defense and security. The second possibility would be shared security and defense. And then the third one would be, you know, defense cooperation, sort of a little bit what we have today, a little bit more, you know, going a little bit forward. Here we have sort of in terms of trends and challenges for tomorrow works life is basically what it has been up to now, what could be in terms of future trends. So in a way, try to find ways to communicate substantive and substantial ideas in a visual format that is appealing, that is easy to grasp, and that is relevant. We believe that this has been very useful for us so far. And I'm trying to speed up now. Then I just wanted to mention the European Strategy and Policy Analysis System, which many people outside Brussels don't know what it is. And this is a collaboration and a project between the Commission, the European Parliament, the Council of the EU, the External Action Service, and the committees, the regions and the Social Economics Committee, that works on global trends. And so this is more about the process, and it's very difficult to have huge disagreements about the future because really no one holds on the future. No one really knows what's going to happen. But at least what we found is that this collaboration has been crucial to have the big administrations of each of the institutions aligned in terms of how the future might look like. We focus very much on global trends. This is our first report. We'll be publishing one now in 2019. Again, there's a lot of networking. We do network. We organize strategic dialogues, for example, on security and defense and many other issues. And so we bring a lot of people also from outside that come and tell us things that sometimes we don't like to listen to. And this year, we organized an annual conference. And this year, the conference will be dedicated to geopolitics. And so this is the topic for a year. These are some of the publications. Like I said, the Shaping the Future was our publication from last year's conference. But I just wanted to let you know that this has, as this has been taken up at the highest institutional level in the European Union by all the institutions. This is an ongoing process, and I believe that this is a useful process. And it's aligned a little bit like the NIC, the National Intelligence Council in the US, that at the start of each administration presents a report on global trends. The same way before, after the Parliament, the European Parliament elections, ASPAS also presents a report to the new leadership about global trends. And last but not least, sort of some reflections on strategic foresight, because as Ulf again mentioned, the tuna conditions, they're here to stay. It's just, it's just a fact that the world is a little bit more. Okay, we can always say that probably, in the past was also, complex and difficult given the, the time that you were, there were different things. But indeed, I think probably the speed, the change, the things that are happening I think I think it's a different pace. And I just wanted to offer some sort of reflections on sort of foresight. First, I don't know whether, now there's a lot of people talking about foresight anticipation, a lot of scenario planning, there's a lot of things going on. I don't know yet if this is just a fashion, it's something that will go away just because people were so caught up, so unprepared in the past few months and years, or whether this is actually something that now people are taking seriously. And I think the fact that the Parliament just created this center, I think people are taking this seriously, and this probably is something that instead of being a fashion is going to be really a trend, and it's going to be established, and it's going to be moving forward. But we do need to maintain, and we need to sustain interest about this, and not just because it's an interesting thing to do, but it's because it's the right thing to do to have, solid and to have resilient policies. Then, of course, there's the issue of demand side and supply side foresight, which you will have here, which is basically how much impact you can have depends on whether your boss asks you for that or not. And sometimes you need to raise awareness on issues that he doesn't or she doesn't want to hear about, but you're going to have that role. And I think this is relevant in terms of how we do things. Then there's this concept that SWAF, the School of International Futures, which is an organization in the UK, is working on, which is lean and agile foresight, which I think it's a very interesting idea. And has to do not only with the lack of time, but also lack of resources. A lot of developing countries, also because of sustainable development goals, want to do more and more foresight, want to do more and more planning and scenario planning, but they just don't have the resources. They just don't have the time. So we need to find, and I anticipate that foresight, just because of this, and that the art of strategic foresight is going to innovate quite a bit in the next few years. Not only also because digital tools will help us to do things in a different way, in a better way. Then I think other 2 points is prototyping. Prototyping is going to be a big thing for the future in terms of foresight. Of course, it's very difficult to prototype geopolitics, but it can still be done. You can do a movie, you can do a short video. But of course, for example, the Danish Design Center is prototyping the hospitals of the future. So they're actually building hospitals, different types of hospitals, of how the hospitals could look in the future. Participatory foresight, I think this is very important for a parliamentary or for a parliament, to do participatory foresight, engage all stakeholders, bring people into the room, have them discuss and align them and also try to challenge assumptions. And then foresight networks, again, I think this is very important because it's about people. It's about us exchanging ideas and learning from one another. And then, from my short experience so far, and you also have the slides, I would say that, in terms for us to have impact, I would say that we need to be in the things that we do. We need to be different. We should not be proposing our bosses to do the same thing. Okay. You can always reframe, to use the strategic reframing from Angela Angela's book, but we should propose, different things and different ways of trying to address address problems. The other name that I was missing was Rafael Ramirez. Then be surprising and up to date. Try to present recommendations that sort of, are outside, are counterintuitive. You actually didn't look at them, or sometimes, they can be actually normal things, but you can just sort of present them in a different way, and also be up to date in terms of the global trends. Like Ulf was saying, sometimes they bend, and sometimes they also intersect and they interlink, and sometimes it's when these things happen that is really what's relevant is happening there. Then be brief. Just write short foresight reports and tell a story. I think bosses like to read stories. They need to be engaged by that. Be visual. Show things. Use graphs, maps. Just make your papers alive. Make the reports that you produce alive. Then be engaged. Have a network again within your institution. Engage with the skeptics. They're going to tell you, no, that's all wrong. That's not going to be like that. You can't do it this way. But also engage with the outside world. Bring experts from outside. Bring people that have different ideas. Be linked. It's good if you have an access to the boss that you can actually put the foot on the door and say, can you please have a look at this? It's very, very hard, believe me. But still, it can be done. I think it's just a matter of doing it. But if you have that, I think that's important. And then going back to your point that you asked before, which is. Be self-critical. Just evaluate what you've done. Look at, like we were saying, some of the scenarios, sometimes they play out, they don't. But go back to what you recommended. Go back to the things that you did and say, where did I get it wrong? And this is one of the messages. I don't know if you know this book, Super Forecasting, Philip Tetlock. He says that the quality of forecasting or foresight can be hugely improved if we actually go back to our sort of work and see where we might have gone wrong in terms of our assumptions. And this will help us do a better job. So never forget, the trend is your friend. So this is not all bad. And thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Thank you.
There's in your presentation, on quite a few occasions, you stressed the importance of asking people outside of your immediate planning team, networking, participatory planning. I don't know if there's any research done about this in terms of political strategy making, but McKinsey has done a lot of research or looking into this in terms of business strategy making, that people fall into this groupthink phenomenon or cycle where they, even if they try to question their own assumptions, as you said, in the end, they often fail to do so. And the best way to get around that is to invite in the people that you would least like to work with sometimes. So how do you get around that possible obstacle? Who gets invited to your participatory events? And are they only people who you can sort of physically network with, or are there sort of digital means that you use for creating a further participation?
All right. Thanks for the question. I think there are two sides. There are two sides to that question in terms of the networks, and precisely I think. And this is a challenge that we have on avoiding sort of the groupthink, and and the people that we have had around, which are they're in a sense they are different because we have not been used, let's say, on the geopolitics, on the defense, on the security. We have had people from NATO. NATO and the EU had not communicated for ages. We are in the same city, right? But there not been sort of this exchange, So our team went to NATO for a day, and then we invite them to come and talk to us, and we brought other people from outside. We also had already the guys from NATO, from Norfolk, Virginia, that do the strategic foresight, come and tell us, things. But going more to your point, sort of the dissenters, the skeptics, and I've had this question also more times, and we have discussed this in other settings. Now, for example, with the populism, should we invite one of these guys into our rooms? It's a really tricky question. It's a very difficult question. Do you want to invite a bigot to your center or something like that? And we've been reluctant, but we have had people come. For example, I want to say, but we had a very sort of senior ambassador from Africa, to come to us and speak, and he just sort of completely criticized from start to end the policies of the EU. and he had all the people that do this policy sitting in front of them, some of them sort of very uncomfortable, but that, we actually didn't know that he was going to do that. But, in a sense, it was great that he did, because that's what we need, right? So I think that's, we try to do that if we can. And also, even in our team, we have the dissenters. We have a couple of people that are always the ones that, oh, there he comes again. But this is really good, because it's the person that's going to sort of challenge your argument. All right? But I think if I can go back again, just to finalize this study that I mentioned, the Thinking the Unthinkable by Nick Gowing, the points that you mentioned, groupthink, risk aversion, that people that are normally have this sort of mind frame are not promoted in companies because, they are disruptors, and so they go against the norm. These are all things that have been identified in this study, and if we continue doing things like this, it will not go far. So I would recommend reading this, and I think we need to do better. But of course, I think the level of engagement to certain people, we still, especially because we are, an institution as the Commission, we do have some limitations. I think other outfits that are, that are not affiliated with a political organization that can have, can invite even more sort of dissenting voices than we can. Yeah.
Thank you. Veel teisi küsimusi ruumist?
Can people introduce themselves so I know who I'm talking with? Thanks.
Thank you. Signe Viimsala from Ministry of Finance. I have just one question. Would you be willing to test, or are you already using regulatory sandboxes also in your European Commission or in your Foresight Center?
Test.
Regulatory sandboxes?
It's regulatory sandboxes. No, we don't use it at the EPSC. I'm sure that probably, the Commission is a very large organization. There's a lot of people doing foresight and strategic foresight in the Commission, the JRC, DGRTD, a lot of organizations. I would have to inquire. We don't do it at the EPSC. Sorry? The sandbox. No, it's a great idea. That's the same way that, for example, we're going to run, I think, in the next couple of months, the first sort of full-fledged scenario exercise at EPSC. with the help of someone from outside that is using already some digital technologies to do this. But we have not done it. So it's a great idea. Thanks very much for that. Yeah.
Veel küsimusi kellelgi?
So I'm Thea from the Foresight Center.
Yeah.
It's probably a question for both of the presenters. I was wondering that, and it concerns the scenarios. I was wondering what's the motivation for the politicians to really seriously engage into preparing for the radical and negative scenarios, because this is not something you put into your political platform unless this has already happened. But if it's not yet happened, you don't put it into the platform because it's shocking for the potential voters. You don't want to scare them off. So I do see here a motivational dilemma for the politicians.
Yeah. Go ahead, start if you can.
Yeah, okay, so there's a limitation. You have to be careful about how radical you go, because if you're too radical, you're simply not listened to. Take the early days of anti-smoking campaigns. I mean, they were, at that time, too radical. They were people just shied away from them. They didn't want to listen to them. So if you bring something that is too radical, and there is not an appetite for it, so you need to test the versions early on with the politicians and the policymakers to see that they can live with them. That's one thing with it. The other thing is that you have to ensure that the scenarios speak to the genuine concerns of the policymakers. And if they speak to the genuine concerns of the policymakers, then you're more likely to be able to live with what's radical. Just like the story that I told about the Arabic Spring. Because they showed the implications, this was in the energy sector, so they showed the implications for the energy sector, and they talked about things that were already worrying them, or things that they normally brought into, aspects that they normally brought into decision making. So you have to ensure that the stories use words and are about things that are very relevant today, normally for the policymakers. And that's the key to be able to be radical in it. But then there's no benefit in itself of being radical. It's the research that will tell you if this can go in radical ways. And if you can get the voice from the politicians in terms of what might be happening to this aspect, and you're voicing that, and you're putting that into one of the radical scenarios, well, then you found a home for a view that is not yours, but that is from that politician, and that can help you sell, if you like, and for you embrace better that more radical scenario. And then just keep in mind that if the weather is just like today, we're fine. Policymakers and the policies are fine. The problem is when there is structural change. So if you can point at that happened in the policy areas, that can also legitimate being more radical.
Yeah, if I can just, I think that's, where I get, the policy and the politics. Sometimes the politics of policy can be, complicated for politicians, because they like to have a central scenario on certain tricky issues. And I do understand, at least as public officials, they don't like to, sort of in very serious situations. We can just look at, let's say, in the past, when there was all this, but I think this was genuine, there was all this fuss that Greece would leave the euro. No, the Commission at the time, we have a central scenario is that Greece stays in the euro and that's it, period, right? So this is the public, let's say, this is the public engagement. And I do believe, and let's say a lot of work that might not be directly related to Foresight that we do is something that is done in smaller groups within the EPSC, and the transmission is between us and the cabinet, and that's it. So there is, because of course in public institutions like a parliament or a government, there are concerns about leakages and, what if one of these things appears in the front page of the Financial Times? Big deal, right? So of course there are these concerns, and we are aware of those. And so I think sometimes when these things are done, they are done in a much more sort of closed fashion than the one that I explained here, which is mostly about engagement, about transparency, about doing this. So I would say that sometimes politicians still want to know and they still want to be informed about this, but these are done in the process of getting there. It's different from what would be a normal process, like the ones that I just described, right? And so I think that, but there you need to have the linkage directly, and sometimes you even deliver in end. You don't send emails, and you do these things in a way that you make sure that things are properly secured and safe, right?
Veel küsimusi?
Hello, I'm Erik Terk, Estonian Institute for Future Studies, Tallinn University. I have a question about publishing, open publishing of scenario text, and for me, the interesting question is that probably there is some kind of contradiction between the provocative questions that are usually working very well in scenario text, and then political correctness. Is this contradiction a problem? For example, before you are publishing the text about European scenarios, probably you have a lot of provocative questions, but this is the question, which type of these questions to put into the official text, or that to not to put, and just to discuss in closer circle.
Yeah. No, I think, I think that naturally, if it's going to be a public document like these are, there is a filtering, but I think that's probably sometimes when even people are engaging in this, in this type of exercise, and then when these things are being prepared, that sort of, that filter is there. It's done in a way that that this is going to be a communication, document. So, with those contradictions, those type of issues, we try to avoid them. But even with the with a white paper on the future of Europe, with the scenarios, we have had so many comments, so much reaction to it, not only to the form, but the shape, the scenarios. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why did this idea there? Why did you have this position on regional policy? Why didn't you say more about this? So this triggers always, people have very different opinions, and we value. I think this is relevant for us to have that type of feedback. To give you an example, on the Trump brief that we did on the scenarios for the Trump administration, that started as sort of an exercise done at EPSC, and we were not even, the paper was just to inform, just for the president. It was a paper to be transmitted like one of these papers to go up and stay there. And then the weekend after, the Monday after, we got an email saying, this is very interesting, why don't you publish it? We were not expecting to publish the paper, but that's, because they thought that even if there were some things that were controversial in that note, or that could be interpreted in a controversial way, they thought it would be fine, that it would be good to engage in a discussion on this. So I don't think, and given that this is, as President Juncker has said many times, this is a political commission, I don't think he has a problem sometimes to be controversial and to say things that, probably other commissions have not done in the past. So I think that's not, I think he doesn't have that, of course, they're within, the limits, but that's politics. Right.
Next question. I'm Liia Hänni from e-Governance Academy. In your presentation, you stressed several times the importance of safe spaces for open discussions and exchange of ideas. But what about online deliberation? Are you using this kind of approach as well? Thank you.
Thank you. And also because I missed part of your question also on the online and the other methods. We do, on the white paper we also published a brochure at the EPSC, and we asked also people from citizens. We also created sort of a form where people could participate and engage and give us feedback. So we try sometimes to have this feedback, but what we find then that it's relevant is that people then recognize that it's valued. And so what we have done is then try to put online all the contributions that we have received, because sometimes in this sort of public engagement, people send their ideas, but then it's sort of falling into like a black hole. If they don't get a reply or so. I think this in public institutions such as big as the Commission, we're always sort of mindful that when we ask for engagement, then that there's a follow-up, or that people feel that their ideas are being listened to, right? So I think that for us that we appreciate this, but we try to do it in our limited way, the EPSC. We try to have this sort of online engagement. To go back to you in terms of bringing people from outside, we have done already a couple of events. For example, sometimes now we are doing hearings on some policy files. And instead of flying people into Brussels, we have people mostly from video conference. And last week we had a seminar on the defense paper. We had, I think, 7 participants in the room and 10 participants from all over Europe coming in through live stream. So we are already also use, and also sometimes just questions or ideas were coming in through the internet, through the email. So we do this as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very, very much for coming and sharing your vision with us.
It was a pleasure.